Say what? Hey guys, man, I'm stoked about this. We got us a deck tech, and we're going to be doing the deck tech for Mind Maze. So before I talk in depth about the cards, I'm just going to go through this deck. This is for the people that really don't give a fuck what I think about the cards or why I run them, and just want a really good deck build, and then they can go wreck the leaderboards. So that's for you guys. I hope you stick around though, because this is hopefully going to be informative. Anyway. 22 land, starting off with Phantasmal Bear. This guy, don't really have to talk about him too much. It's a 1 mana for a 2/2, usually gets in for 2 or 4 damage. It can profitably block a Champion of the Parish, so that bastard just can't pop in on turn 2. That's going to save you some life, but besides that, he's just a bear. He's a bear. I mean, there's not much to talk about. For 1, Veiled Sentry, try not to cast this card on turn 1. Try to cast this card in the mid game. And because if this thing's a 1/1, you just feel really stupid. And a lot of decks run 1-drops, so it might just be almost a dead card for you if you don't. It turns into a 1 mana chump blocker at that point. So moving on, run both of them though. Try to cast them mid game, mid to late game. All 4 of these unsummons. Okay, so I think you run all 4. It's one of the best cards. No, I shouldn't say it's one of the best cards in your deck. That's not true. But it's a really good tempo play, and it'll help you win a lot of games where you should have lost them. It's really good with Snapcaster Mage, which we'll get to in a little bit. Run all 4 of them. There is a chance that you misplay this card that could cost you the game. So this deck is not an autopilot deck, even though most people would say it is. It's really not. Getting to 20 sometimes is difficult, especially against bad matchups. So Unsummon will definitely help you do that. Don't just snap save your creature when it's about to die just because you have Unsummon mana open. It might not be the best play. Think about it. That's all I'm going to say. All right, Phantasmal Image. I love this card so much. I have such a love for this card. It's because I ran a Birthing Pod deck when Birthing Pod was in Standard in real life. And if y'all knew anything about those decks, Phantasmal Image is beast in those decks. So yeah, Phantasmal Image is really good in this deck though. You don't give a fuck about my Birthing Pod deck from 2 years ago, do you? Phantasmal Image is really good. You usually target Lord of the Unreal if he's on the battlefield, but you might want to think about it. It's almost always the best play to copy Lord of the Unreal, but sometimes your best play might be Illusionary Servant. Sometimes your best play is Halcyon Glaze, and sometimes your best play is Krovikan Mist or Snapcaster Mage even. It's not always Lord of the Unreal. It's usually Lord of the Unreal though. But this card's really good, and you can copy something balmy on their side of the battlefield too. Keep that in mind. Alright, moving on to Lord of the Unreal. Run all 4 of these for obvious reasons. It is the core of your deck. This is the card that gets you around the illusion disadvantage. This is what's going to help you win games when otherwise you just get stomped by a bunch of targeted removal. If you can have this thing resolved for a while, your things get in alive, which is always good. So yeah, run all 4 of those, and it's obviously it's a Lord, it buffs your creatures. So Snapcaster Mage, not running a whole lot of instants or sorceries in this deck. I'm running 4 unsummons. That's a pretty good target for it. Usually is. Counterspell is most of the time. I would say not most of the time, but that's a really strong play of 4 mana open. They lay a creature. You flash in Snapcaster, counterspell their shit. I mean, it's so good. Such a good play. Other than that, I don't think I've ever Frost Breath with it, but that seems like a pretty good play. Divination if you're in a bind. Cryptic Command if you're at 6 mana, which is unlikely, but most likely it's going to be Counterspell or Unsummon. Oh, this card's really good. It can also, it's a 2/1 with Flash, so it can also surprise a Champion of the Parish, which would be pretty sweet. I don't think I've done that, but I'm not even sure if it would be worth it, but possibly. That dude's the artwork's kind of funny. The guy looks funny in the picture. I actually think this is one of those cards that's built around a person in real life, he won a contest or something like that. So that's actually a person in real life. Anyway, moving along, Krovikan Mist. This is pretty obvious. It's a 2 mana. A lot of times it's a lot bigger than just a 1/1. You're going to cast this with 2 or 3 guys out, and this card is Bomb Diggity. It does not have the illusions disadvantage. Keep that in mind. Gossamer Phantasm. I cut 2 of the. I'm only running 2. I cut 2 of them for 2 of the counter spells. I think it's really good. It's 2 power in the air for 2, and I think it's necessary. It helps you push through early damage and helps you push in that last bit of damage that you need at the late game too. So that card's pretty much good at any phase in the game, I would say, just in general. But anyway, moving along. Counterspell. It wasn't in this deck for the longest just because I never had mana open to... I didn't want to leave mana open because I wanted to be aggressive, because obviously I'm running a 22 land, multiple creature deck. I want to be aggressive, tapping out every turn for creatures. So I was never able to cast Counterspell, but this is where Counterspell shines. It's when you have 4 mana. I can't really say on turn 4 because you usually don't hit your 4th land drop with 22 lands on time. But Counterspell with 4 lands out, like say you go Gossamer Phantasm, and then you Counterspell a Mutilate or something like that would absolutely wreck you, or really just Counterspell anything on that next turn. That's when it becomes relevant, is in the later games when you're at 4 mana or more, or 5 mana if you have a 3-drop in your hand. But don't leave mana open to counter something in general. Just in general, I wouldn't do it. That's why the Counterspell wasn't in the deck in the first place. Moving on to Phantom Warrior, I didn't want to run this card. It was like my 59th and 60th card when I first built this deck, the deck before the unlocks and everything. But this deck is really shine. I mean, this card has really shined. It surprised me. It helps you push through late game damage when they're at like 5. You can swing in with this twice usually because you have a Lord out. It usually helps you on that front, and more importantly, it's a bomb in the mirror match. This and Illusionary Servant are crazy good in the mirror, and of course, you know, Lord's Counterspell. There's a couple other cards, but this one in particular, along with Illusionary Servant, in the mirror match is ridiculously good. I think it's good. Run it. I didn't like it at first, but I like it a lot more now. Illusionary Servant, one of the best creatures in your deck. It can attack, it can block, it can slice, it can dice. It's got that illusion ability on it, which kind of sucks, but usually this thing has a Lord protecting it, and it's the bomb diggity. Like I said, I don't know why I've said bomb diggity twice in this video when I've never said bomb diggity in my life, I don't think, but that's happening. I probably heard it on the radio or something. But Phantasmal Image, I target Illusionary Servant with Phantasmal Image a lot. Anyway, moving on to Halcyon Glaze, probably the first controversial include that y'all might not like. I've never been upset with this card. Even when I top deck this late game, I'm fine with it. The only time I found that this card is bad is if if you don't draw something live, this draw step you lose. And then Halcyon Glaze is obviously a dead card. I love this card. I think it's great. It gets around sorcery speed removal, which I guess there's not really a whole lot of, but it's really good. I love it. Run it. If you trust my builds, run it. Claustrophobia, sometimes you just have to take care of a creature. I realize it doesn't get it all the way off the board, so it has a relevant ability. This is not the greatest removal spell, but this is really good. Enchanted Moldiah, tap down their Primeval Titan, things like that. And it found, this might be 59 and 60. No, maybe not. They're pretty good for me. I like the build. I like them in the build. Frost Breath, really good tempo play. Usually when you cast Frost Breath, it's for the dub, and it's like a game-winning spell. It might not be that turn, obviously, but it's game-winning for you usually. Divination is on the similar lines as, in the similar vein as Counterspell is. You don't want to cast this when you hit 3 mana. You want to be casting other things, doing other things. Divination is when you've dumped your entire hand out on the battlefield and you need more gas for some reason. He's picked apart a couple of your creatures. This helps you get to 20 damage in one way or another. Hopefully you don't draw 2 lands with it, but I think it's incredible in the build. Run both of them. Phantasmal Dragon, fairly obvious. It's a 4-mana 5/5. It has the illusionary disadvantage to it, but it's a 4-mana 5/5, for fuck's sake. Cryptic Command, this card, it's a little expensive. It's a bit awkward. Usually, the choose 2 is counter target spell and draw a card, but tap all creatures your opponents control is game-winning. Return target opponent permanent to its owner's hand is possibly the lesser of the 4, the least of the 4, but usually it's counter draw. So it's a really powerful card. It gives you a ton of options. That's what makes it so good. I say run it. So as far as the cards that I don't run, I'm not going to talk about every single damn one. I'm only going to talk about, I guess, the controversial ones. Jace's Phantasm might be a controversial one, but I'm just not going to talk about it. I would run all 4 Gossamer Phantasms by running 2 of the counter spells, so they ended up getting the cut. These cards just aren't good enough. If you run Staff, don't run Staff. Take it out. Run a land instead of Staff, for Pete's sake. Claustrophobia, 2 is enough. I don't really want 3. Cancel, along the same lines as Counterspell. You're going to be tapping out in the early stages, so this is really for late game counters. I could see you maybe running this. I don't really know what you would cut, so maybe you don't run this. Like, don't even think about running this. Okay, wishful thinking, not good enough. Keep moving on. And then pretty much the only thing we have to talk about, I didn't skip over it, I saw it. Pretty much the only thing we have to talk about, well, let's talk about Temporal Mastery before we talk about Force of Will. Temporal Mastery is, it could be put in the deck, it could be decent in the deck. Decent. But if this card's in your opening hand, you're sad, you're so sad. It's a dead card in this build. You're not going to hit 7 mana. If you've hit 7 mana, you've probably lost the game. So that's why it didn't make the deck. Okay, Force of Will. I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but if you're just kind of looking through deck text and you happen to see this video and you're like, what the fuck? Why aren't you running this? Click off. Don't click off yet. Just hear me out. And this is the caveat. If you want to run this card, just cut and unsummon and run it. Like, I'm not saying this card is bad. It's literally like one of the best counterspells in the entire game ever since like 1940 when this game was introduced. Force of Will is incredible. It's a free counterspell. It's free mana. It's free mana cost wise. It's gonna 2-for-1 you every single damn time. That's why it's bad in this build, I think. The only time you cast Force of Will, and another thing, I see people misplaying this card so bad. They just counter things because they think they can counter it. They're like, oh shit, that's an Undead War Chief, which is a really good lord in Deadwalkers, right? If that card is not going to cause you to lose the game, you should not cast Force of Will and counter it because you're 2-for-1 in your damn self. You're losing yourself the game doing that, I think, most of the time. If you play it correctly, though, it can be really good. The only time you cast this is if they cast a game-losing spell. If this spell resolves, you will lose the fucking game. Mutilate comes to mind. You know, any of the board wipes, pretty much just anything that's going to definitely make you lose. A gigantic bomb that you're not going to be able to take care of. Force of Will really shines in that case. I don't run it. It's weird running Counterspell over Force of Will, but if you trust my deck building skills, trust that I don't run Force of Will for a reason. And like I said, don't take this deck tech to heart. If you really want to run Force of Will because it's amazingly strong, and you'd be right in saying that, cut and unsummon. Try this deck out if you care about leaderboards, because this is one of the best decks in the game, and it's not Avacyn's Glory. That's more important. So this will wreck leaderboards, I guarantee it. If you pilot it correctly, it doesn't autopilot itself. Sometimes it does. Like if they just have like a late game deck, you can sometimes just win the game before they do anything. But it's not autopilot. You need to make crucial tempo plays at the right time to win with this deck, but as long as you do, you're going to be winning a shit ton of games. Trust me. That's going to do it for this deck tech. I will see you homies later.